A little bit like Ben Hunt. He's always in the game. He's got a pretty good instinct. We haven't even scratched the surface. Like, it was an impressive victory yesterday, but he's a bit of a player, isn't he? He's only a teenager, Jackson. I love the humility he plays with.
Well, we've just had an exciting round 6 of the NRL, and it's Monday, which means it is time for the Billy Slater Podcast. All thanks to Tab. So much to talk about. How are you, Billy?
I'm well, Salty, and how time changes things. Only a few years ago, the Bulldogs were on the bottom of the ladder and the Panthers were flying high, and hasn't that flipped around? The only thing keeping the Panthers off the bottom of the ladder is for and against, and the undefeated Bulldogs coming off a bye. I'm sure we'll get into that Good Friday clash with the Bunnies a little bit later in the show. But, yeah, how times change and things change, and it doesn't take very long.
No, it doesn't. Although, mind you, Billy, West Tigers fans might disagree with you about how long it can take for things to change. But, hey, they're in the top 8 after 6 rounds, and Tigers fans should be celebrating.
Can you believe that they haven't played finals since 2011? That's loyalty. If you're still wearing an orange and black jersey and supporting your team, you stick with them because you got a footy team there, and they've done some really good things this year, still challenging themselves with some consistency about their game and still finding their best footy, but they've shown glimpses of what they can do, and to nearly keep the Newcastle Knights to 0 up at Newcastle in front of a packed McDonald Jones Stadium, I think that's a huge achievement. And he scored a try in Newcastle right at the death. And, they'll be really proud of their performance at the moment, the Tigers, and they're onto something. So stick with your team.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, you were there, or calling the game anyway, at least for the game for the Nine Network yesterday. And Terrell May, Billy, he's got some great support too in that forward pack, But Terrell May, what he's brought to that team, they dominated the Knights, and the Knights just looked listless in attack, didn't they?
Yeah, he's had a really good 12 months, Terrell May. He's obviously got a really big tank. The motor in him is exceptional. He doesn't look like he ever gets tired. And I heard did he run a marathon in the off season or pre-season? Like, that just goes to show that. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that just goes to show you what sort of commitment he has to his training and how you can perform when you are super fit. He's a wonderful player, and like you said, he's got a lot of support. I think Twal's doing a really good job, and the other guy is Fanua Pole. He is a real weapon and all power, and they've got a footy team there, and they've got a really good balance. We're talking about these engine room players in the middle of the field, and then they've got class in their key positions. Their outside backs are doing a really good job. So, yeah, Benji Marshall's doing a fantastic job with the players that he's got there, and they're building a footy team. They're building a little bit of culture, and they're on their way.
Can I get you to expand here, Billy, on something that you raised in commentary yesterday about Jareem Buller, who, he's still very young, not only in age terms, but in his rugby league journey. You said just wait until they can unlock Jareem Buller. There's no ceiling to this bloke. The talent that he's got is unbelievable. I know you're impressed by what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely, and we haven't even scratched the surface. Like, it was an impressive victory yesterday, but what they're doing with him, and this gets a little bit technical, so I'll try and make it as simple as possible, but what they're doing with him in terms of the structure of their attack is they're placing Jareem Buller on the right-hand side of the field, and they're allowing Luai and Lockie Galvin just to float the left-hand side and float to the right and bring Buller into the game. And what that does is it just gives Buller a simple focus in his attack. He only has to sit on that right-hand side, look for an opportunity. When he gets the opportunity, call the ball like he did on the weekend, put in a little kick for himself. So if he sees that space, take it. If not, we'll get the ball to you. So I think the evolution is actually letting him float around and building that freedom into his game, because he's a wonderful player. And I understand what they're doing in terms of the structure of their attack. But once they get that structure and once they get that freedom, that's where Melbourne are at. You see those players in Melbourne's spine, they're not locked into any position. So it's probably a necessity right now in terms of the development of these younger key position players and for the benefit of the team. But once they get it and once they start understanding the game a little bit more, they'll be able to unlock Jareen Buller so much more, and they'll be a really dangerous football team.
Yeah, absolutely. So well done to Benji and what he's doing there. It's interesting. We'll go from Jareen Buller back to Thursday night and the hammer and the Dolphins. They've unlocked Hammerso after a slowish start to the season, haven't they? And it's been a couple of good weeks now for the Dolphins. What do you make of their performance against Penrith?
Yeah, they pulled the hammer out of the toolbox, didn't they? They found the key to him and certainly unlocked him. He opened the scoring only 3 minutes into the game, and he was the one who created the line break for Herbie Farnworth, backed up on the inside and scored the try within 3 minutes of play. And then he finished proceedings as well with that beautiful line break at the end of the game. Look, he's a player you just want to bring into the game. He's a wonderful athlete and he's got great anticipation to the game. So that's why we see him score so many tries down the middle supporting, because he can read that play before anyone else. And the more you can get the footy in Hammer's hands in space, the better the Dolphins are going to go. And they hit a bit of form now. That's a couple in a row for the Dolphins. And there's been a few players that have been really impressive for the Dolphins. I think their centres have been great. Herbie Farnworth is always involved. But the other guy, Jake Averillo, he had one of his best games, for the Dolphins on the weekend. And, he's got blistering speed as well and, great try scorer. And when they use the football around that midfield, they're a really dangerous footy team. And then they've got these hard workers through the middle. You got Tom Gilbert, Max Plath. I thought Josh Kerr did a great job coming off the bench. He added a bit of punch. So, they're a footy team and they come up against the Melbourne Storm on Friday night. That's going to be a beauty. Yeah,
it will be. Looking forward to that one at Suncorp Stadium on Friday evening. So that's going to be a terrific night. I just look at the Dolphins, Billy, and I often think, wow, wonder how good they'd be. I mean, they're going well at the moment, but if they can just somehow find a way medically to get Thomas Flegler on the field. I know there's still hope that he's going to play the second half of the season, and I know you would have seen him as well in recent times. He looks as fit as a fiddle. It's frustrating, isn't it, for us as league fans? You can only imagine what it's like for him. He looks physically so well, but just can't get out in the field at the moment.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough story for Tommy Flegler. Obviously, you don't run on your shoulder, so he'd be keeping his running fitness up and all that. But, yeah, I think the priority for Tom is to get his shoulder healthy. Footy would be totally secondary at the moment. I know players don't think like that because I've been in that position, and all you want to do is get back and play, and you don't really care about what's next. But, I think first and foremost, the health of Tom, post-career is really important to think about. And then if he can get back and play the game, well, that's a wonderful achievement. So, fingers crossed for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Also at Suncorp Stadium on Friday night, the Roosters, what a performance. I mean, young Savala, his first game in the number 7 jersey was really good, but you have to be impressed if you're a Roosters fan and just the effort from all 17 of the players in the way that they went about their business against Brisbane.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it takes. It takes an even contribution from everyone, especially when you're in a development phase. When you've got all these young guys coming through, and Savala was, fantastic. He had a great kicking game. I thought Billy Smith that has had a terrible run of injury of late, and comes back in and great example of persistence and resilience. I thought he was one of the better players for the Roosters. And they just fought hard. They took it right to the Broncos. The Broncos had hit the front and they had to fight back. And, it was a wonderful performance to go up to Brisbane in front of 40,000 fans at Suncorp Stadium and beat a team that are, not in the best form, but are one of the teams in a bit of form in the competition. They're sitting up at the top of the ladder. And, that was a huge performance. So the Roosters have after their tough start to the year, they've beaten the Panthers, and now they've beaten the Broncos. So a couple of feathers in their cap.
Yeah, that's for sure. One player I want to ask you about from the Roosters and their win. I mean, you've touched on Billy Smith already, but there's one guy that just goes about his business there at the Roosters. In Connor Watson, Billy, I thought in commentating the game on Friday night, obviously you're touching the ball more than anyone on the field when you're playing at 9, but he made some good, insightful runs. Defensively, he's really good. He's just that rock in the middle of the park at the moment for the Chooks.
Well, he competes. The one thing that comes to mind when I think of Connor Watson is a competitor, a little bit like Ben Hunt. He's always in the game. He's got a pretty good instinct, in the game, whether to pass it, whether to run it. And I think his default is probably to run, which is not a bad default in the current game. But I just love how he competes. He's always putting his body on the line, always taking the line on. So he's a great, barometer for the Roosters and where they're at, and a really good example for some of these young guys coming through.
Now, also on Friday night, we had the Dragons thrash the Gold Coast Titans. Christian Tuipulotu with a couple of tries here. Interesting because his coach had warned him, no more of the show me the money try celebration. He didn't do it for the first try, but he couldn't help himself for the second. And I think Shane Flanagan didn't mind so much, just let him go. But he was very good, and the Dragons were good.
They were. It was probably their best performance of the year. They've won some tight games. They've lost some tight games. And this was a game where their attack really clicked, and I thought their left-hand side was fantastic. Started with young Egan on the left in the back row, and then brought Luciano Leilua on, and he just adds another dimension to the Dragons' attack. The left centre, handy purchase in the off-season, Valentine Holmes, didn't he create some space for himself and move really well? There was one try off, I think it was Luciano Leilua's pass, where he just moved on the pass. It was a brilliant move, and he's been a real shining light for the Dragons, and saw the value of the purchase in the off season, on the weekend, and they're doing a bit right, the Dragons, and they certainly put it together on the weekend. Yeah,
well done to the Dragons. On Saturday, Billy, we saw rugby league all over the place. 2 games in Perth, 1 game in Darwin, good crowds at both. But Cronulla against Manly, they got over the line. When there was that intercept try with only, 2 minutes to go, and you thought, it's not going to happen to the Sharks 2 weeks in a row, is it? But they got the job done, and I heard Craig Fitzgibbon on the continuous call team saying, sometimes you just got to win ugly, and he's very thankful that he was on the flight back with the 2 competition points.
Yeah, when Daly Cherry-Evans scored under the post with a minute to go, they were rushing back for the kickoff, and you could imagine what was flooding through the Sharks players' minds just only a week ago up against the Raiders. But they held on this time. You learn from your mistakes, and they got the job done. Look, I thought, there's been a lot of conversation around their halves in Trindle and Hines, and I thought they were heavily involved. And Nico Hines ran the ball 14 times, ran for over 100 metres, and didn't Trindle have a couple of classy moments at the back end of the first half? It was 0-0 after half an hour, and he was the difference. He threw a beautiful pass to Stone Street, and then backed that up with a lovely kick down that right-hand side to Stone Street scored his second try. So, it just helps when you've got these really classy players in key positions that, when the game is in the balance, and we saw Adam Reynolds do it last week, when the game is in the balance, they can just pull something out, a real nice bit of play, bit of class, and just get points on the board, and that just takes a bit of pressure off you, and I think that was the difference for the Sharks.
Just on the Sharks, did we see one of the greatest non-tries in the history of the game with poor Will Kennedy? I don't think there's too many arguments about it being called back, but boy, it was some effort.
Yeah, and then he backed it up and pretty much scored one straight after it. It was a brilliant move. He's a wonderful player, isn't he? He just reminds me of a great number 1 Sharks player in the past, and David Peachey. He just moves and glides and has great instinct, really good skill, and he's had a pretty good year, Will Kennedy. He's been very consistent, and he's a player that can really create stuff for them.
So that was the Sharks getting the job done. The second game in the doubleheader over at Optus Stadium in Perth was the Cowboys taking on South Sydney. Cowboys, it was below par first half, much better in the second. They got the job done. But again, Billy, Jackson Purdue just continues to impress.
He's a bit of a player, isn't he? He's only a teenager, Jackson. I love the humility he plays with. He doesn't get up in the camera. He doesn't sort of celebrate too much. He goes about his business. He's playing out of position, doing a wonderful job for his team. He's a real player right now, but he's going to be an exceptional player in the future. Hearing that his preferred position is in the halves, maybe 5'8". So, you could imagine another couple of off seasons under his belt, a little bit more footy knowledge, and then moving into his preferred position. He's going to be a wonderful player for the Cowboys for a long period of time, and hopefully he stays at the Cowboys. He's from Cowboy country up in Mackay, and it'd be great to see him, represent the Cowboys long term. And I just love his attitude and the way that he goes about it. But the Cowboys have fought back here. They were 0-3, after 3 rounds, and now they've won 3 on the trot. So they haven't done it in great style, but they've done it with a bit of grit and a bit of hunger, and just hanging in there. And they've come up with some tight wins, and it was a good win over in Perth. They'd been in camp for a week. They played in Sydney the week before and stayed down in Sydney and went over to Perth early. So they get the bye this week, a well-earned rest, and there's nothing like going into the bye after winning 3 straight, that's for sure. Now,
one thing I do, Billy, is I pay attention to things you talk about each week, because I know many of our viewers and listeners do as well. And last week you were talking about Scott Drinkwater and what he does not only in attack but also defensively as well. And I was watching him with great interest on the weekend, just with what your words were sitting there, and there'll be teachers of mine listening saying you never paid attention back in class, but I do to you, Billy. And mate, attack-wise, particularly in the second half, he did some great things. But again, defensively, he was on song, the Cowboys' number one.
Well, the one thing about Scott Drinkwater is he knows the game. And I think someone asked me, I might have been on this podcast, one of the listener questions was, what's the one attribute that you should work on? And just understanding the game is really important. Sure, you want to be fast, you want to have a great passing game, you want to be able to tackle, kick, and all that sort of stuff. But the knowledge of the game, look at some of the players like Adam Reynolds, the really smart players, Nathan Cleary. That's why he is at the top of his game, because they understand the game. They mightn't be the quickest. Sometimes they mightn't have the best skill, but if you know the game, like Scott Drinkwater does, defensively you can make decisions, you can help your team out, put players in certain positions to help nullify the opposition's attack. And that's a real strength of his game, is understanding the game and putting the opposition in 2 minds. And he did that in the not on the weekend, but the week 2 weeks before that, pretty much saved the game for his team. So it's a fair skill to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, what about the Raiders? Very good again on the weekend. They've had one or two below par performances in the opening 6 rounds, but overall, Ricky's Raiders on fire at the moment. Hudson Young playing really well. They've got a really good footy team there, don't they, in the nation's capital?
They do. And the thing I love about the Raiders is they do it their way. I've often said that there's more than one way to play this game. And the Raiders have found their way. It's not your traditional rely on some top line key position players to be the best player on the field and set up 2 or 3 tries and all of a sudden you find yourself winning a footy game. They have an even contribution through the 17 players, and they do it the hard way. They do it the physical way, starting with their 2 front rowers. Actually, you probably go 3 front rowers. You got Corey Horsburgh up there with Joe Tarpany and Big Papa. They do a wonderful job just to set the foundation of their footy. And then they've got these 2 X-factor back rowers. I think Matty Nicholson he's got a point of difference. And then you've got Hudson Young, who, he's their go-to player. You saw last week when the game was on the line, who do we give it to? We give it to Hudson Young, and he created a bit of a line break and an offload, and then their outside backs are really athletic. They're strong. They're powerful. So they don't rely on any one player. Although Jamal Fogarty's a real glue for them. He does a great kicking game, and they just have an even contribution. And, all of a sudden they put 50 points on the board. But, they do it their way, the Raiders, and, that's why they're so hard to play against, because they're different to everyone else.
As far as their outside backs are concerned, I mean, you touch on a lot of the forwards, etc. But there's guys here, Billy, that not too many outside of Canberra knew about. Young Tamale, for instance, he's just coming in and doing a job for his team, and that's been Ricky Stewart's mantra, isn't it? Everyone just comes in and does their job almost with no frills about it.
Yeah, and when you have a team first mentality and team first culture, that's what happens. And the other thing is, a lot of their senior guys have really high standards at that club, and therefore when the younger guys come in, they've got to rise and meet those standards. So I think their outside backs are doing a great job. Ricky Stewart's put a lot of faith in Kyo Weeks at fullback, and Tamale, he's a real strong player. I don't know where he's been. I believe he was at the Dragons for a little bit, but I never saw him play a whole heap of first grade at the Dragons, and all of a sudden he's at a club that he's really thrived in. So sometimes it's just about a change of environment, and the environment's pretty good down in Canberra at the minute.
Yeah, it certainly is. The whole Jamal Fogarty future is going to be interesting, isn't it? Ricky doesn't want to stand in his way. If Manly are going to offer him 2 years, mind you, Ricky has said Manly haven't been allowed to talk to him up until after this week. So interesting times. It's going to be, let's see where he ends up, Jamal.
It's a tricky situation because Canberra have obviously got a succession plan, for especially their key position. They've gone out and they've bought and helped develop some of the best young talent in the country in these key positions. I think it's Ethan Sanders, looking at playing halfback long term for the Raiders. Chevy Stewart at fullback. So they're doing a really good job in looking to the future. And they've been really honest with their players. Jamal Fogarty knows exactly the situation that he's in, and does he stay at Canberra for 1 year, or for a little bit less money, or does he look to have a bit of security for his family, long term, 2 or 3 year deal somewhere else, and he's a wonderful player, and there's not a whole heap of halfbacks out there that are controlling like him. He's got a great kicking game. And if you've got some quality in and around him, like he's a wonderful pickup. So, look, it's a really tough decision, and only one that you can make personally. And Jamal Fogarty will do that. I think it's going to be in sooner rather than later. I've heard maybe even this week we'll find out what Jamal Fogarty is going to do. But I'm sure he doesn't want to leave Canberra, but through some situations, it might be forced.
All right, well, we'll watch the developments there with great interest, just like we will the Storm and the Warriors. I know that this game was put well beyond doubt early with another Storm first half blitz, but injury concerns for both teams. Jerome Hughes and his shoulder with Melbourne, and then a concussion for Chancellor Klukstad and his pec injury. We'll wait on scans of that one for James Fisher-Harris for the Warriors.
Yeah, that's a big blow, and when you're talking pecs, they're not a couple of weeks. So, James Fisher-Harris and Chance Nickel-Klukstad, hopefully it's not too serious with the head injury that he went on with Chance. He's had a few in his career, so I'm sure they'll be treading lightly there. And I believe Jerome Hughes could have come back on the field in the second half, but it was precautionary. It did look like an AC joint problem for Jerome, which can be quite painful, but you can actually play with them with a little bit of pain relief. So it'd be interesting if he gets up in the 5-day turnaround for the Dolphins game. We'll find out tomorrow whether he's named, and then I'm sure they'll go from there. Handy replacement in Tyron Wishart, and I thought he did a great job in the second half. But how good were they in the first half, Salty? That was an impressive first half by Melbourne. They pretty much kept up with the clock. It was 36-0 at half time, and they all went to work. They just looked fast, they looked powerful, and they looked clinical with their plays. So, the Melbourne Storm, they're looking good, aren't they?
Billy, with some of the ball movement that Ali Katoa showed in that first half, he might be going to Craig this week and saying, hey, just put the number 7 on me. He's got some skills, doesn't he? We've known that for a long time, but boy, he was brilliant, as was the back row on the other side of the field. Sean Bloor was very good as well. Both of them so hard to handle.
Yeah, they're both doing a wonderful job, and it's not as silly as it sounds. He could literally play halfback. He is a wonderful player, probably one of, if not the best back rowers in the game. Like he's got everything. He's got size, he's got speed, he's got power, he's got footwork, but then he's got this finesse that he can play with, and he's got a great work ethic. He's great under high ball. It's not as silly as it sounds, but everyone's playing well. You know, Sean Bloor's doing a great job on that left-hand side with Cameron Munster and Jack Howarth, and then on that right, you got Ali Katoa. He's got a really good combination with Jerome Hughes. And boy, if they stay healthy, they're going to take some beating in September and October.
Harry Grant playing some terrific footy at the moment as well, isn't he? Just he's backing up. He's running. We know how good he is. I mean, it's almost like standard for him, I know, but sometimes we forget to talk about him because we're used to him playing so well each and every week. But boy, the start of the season, he's having something else.
Yeah, and the one thing Harry's always had is he's always had effort, and he's the captain of the club now, and he's leading by example. But he's just got those moments of class and instinct that help as well. I think Trent Liero and Josh King, doing a fantastic job through the middle. So you can go through their whole side and really say that they're playing a 7 or 8 out of 10 or higher, and that's what Craig Bellamy demands. He demands that consistency, and if your best effort's here, well, your worst effort's only that margin below it. It doesn't fluctuate too much. You want to be a consistent player, and that's what he works on.
All right, yeah, they were very good. Melbourne will get onto the Storm in their next game in just a moment, because they take on the Dolphins this Friday night on Good Friday. This is the Billy Slater Podcast, and it's all thanks to Tab.
Fans always ask, Loza, what was the best era of league? And I tell them, nothing beats the line-breaking, flick-passing, goose-stepping, Vegas-flying, turbo try-scoring, origin drought-breaking, simply the best era of footy we're in right now. And with more market stats and insights, it's easy to enjoy the best era in footy with the best app in footy.
Tab. We're on.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.
Time now for the Billy M Medal on the Billy Slater Podcast, the best player and the best team from each week, thanks to Tab. So, Billy, which of the winners over the weekend was your best performing team in our Billy M's?
Yeah, the team that I just spoke about played yesterday, the Melbourne Storm. I think, there were some impressive victories. I thought the Raiders up in Darwin were great, but that first half against the Warriors, the Warriors have been going pretty good over the last month, and the Melbourne Storm, they treated them like a reserve grade team, really, and they were just far more superior. They were quicker, better ball movement, sharper plays, and to score 36 points. I think it was 30 points after half an hour, and then 36 after 40 minutes. That was some sort of first half, and sold out Amy Park down in Melbourne. It was looked a really good atmosphere, and the Melbourne Storm, the team of the week.
Yeah, they were outstanding. All right, a few contenders here for the Billy M Player of the Round.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Hammer. I just think that he was superb. Thursday night. He heavily involved, but not only did he score 3 tries, I thought the first couple of tries he pretty much set the line break up, and they attacked from that midfield, and that's when he's really dangerous going at the defence, and he set them up with beautiful ball playing, and then he pushed up through the middle and scored them as well. So that final try was wonderful to see Hammer in a bit of space, and as soon as he gets the ball and the defensive line's just not quite set, you're on the edge of your seat and you're like, oh, look out. And then he just went whoosh. So, yeah, it was good to see the Hammer back into form, and he's the player of the week.
Excellent stuff. Well done to the Hammer. That's the Billy M medal. Thanks to Tab. The NRL season is here for the best time in sport. Tab has the best app in sport. Tab, we're on.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
That's Billy Slater. I'm Peter Basoldis. This has been the Billy Slater Podcast, all thanks to Tab.
You've been watching another production from Nine's Wide World of Sports.